In just 6 days, Fallout 76's Wastelanders DLC drops. And although I'm sure many of you just want to know all the nitty-gritty details on that, and I actually will have in the next couple of days like a giant video going over literally everything we know thus far. I'm working on it now, just waiting for the trailer that was just confirmed to be coming out tomorrow to really have it be basically comprehensive. But before that, I actually wanted to make this video. For those of you that are stuck at home trying to get ready for this DLC, or just maybe haven't been following Fallout 76 super closely. As in this video, what I want to do is prepare you for the DLC. Give you a rundown of Fallout 76's main story, or at least all of the relevant parts as it pertains to Wastelanders, and even further, actually give you some ideas as to how you can better prepare in-game. Things you should be doing, things you should be expecting to change. So treat this almost as your Wastelanders pre-survival guide. One of the first big things is Fallout 76's main story. Wastelanders isn't a direct continuation of the main story of Fallout 76, meaning that there's a lot you just don't need to know. It seems like several of those major factions, the Enclave, Brotherhood of Steel, are not going to be making this giant comeback, so it's not like you really need to know all the details on those factions. I mean, during the main story, you're literally learning about dead people, so it's not like they're coming back from the dead. But one thing we do know is you're going to want to know about the Scorched and the Scorched Plague. To really make it simple, basically the Scorched Plague comes from the Enclave, but indirectly. The Enclave were doing experiments with mutations, and at one point, bats were accidentally exposed to some sketchy stuff. Those bats ended up turning into scorch beasts, the Enclave continued to study them, and then later on, this crazy guy who was running the local chapter of the Enclave, known as Eckert, wanted to decrease the DEFCON level of the region so we could actually launch nukes, mainly to use against communists, release the scorch beasts so the automated systems would read a lower DEFCON level, give him access to those nukes, and that ended up starting the spread of the Scorched Plague. The plague itself spreads via the Scorch Beast, and this is what eventually wiped out the entire region. By the end of Fallout 76, we try and wipe out the Scorched Plague by taking down the Scorch Beast Queen, but this doesn't work. As we know, the Scorched Plague and the Scorched Beast still have a presence in Wastelanders, and from some of the previews we know that some of the early questing by us will be to address that, although we don't know exactly how. Although there are a few obvious options. In the main story of Fallout 76, one of the first things we do is actually vaccinate ourselves against the Scorched Plague, so we never contract it. Basically, the responders were super close, just a couple of steps away to actually finishing the vaccine just before they were all wiped out. We used the existing data and research to actually finish the inoculation process. So now with Wastelanders, you're going to have a plethora of new people coming to a plague-infested city, so likely this will be relevant. Now as far as distribution or how you're going to get it to all those people, who knows? Although someone who is likely to play a massive role here is the Overseer. When you kick off Fallout 76, what you're doing is actually following in the footsteps of the Overseer. And we know that with Wastelanders, we're doing something similar. The exact role she plays or the size of that role isn't clear, but in the store page, it's clearly labeled that we are still doing the bidding of the Overseer and Wastelanders. In the main story of Fallout 76, you are following in the footsteps of the Overseer. She basically makes all of the discoveries before you and then you just follow. Although she's always a couple hours or so ahead of you, so you never quite catch up. That's how we actually found out that the responders were working on a cure and fairly close to a cure in the first place. Her initial directive by Vault-Tec was in fact to secure the nuclear silos of the region. But on this journey, she took a detour and saw the devastation of the region. And as such, it motivated her to actually get the Vault 76 dwellers together to try and fix things. So seemingly we'll be reintroduced into this character in some capacity with Wastelanders. So effectively, she completed the main story of Fallout 76, knows most of the same stuff, just didn't launch all of the nukes. In fact, towards the end of the game, after the player launches his own nuke, you'll actually get a holotape from her that does condemn this action. It's actually against the use of these nuclear weapons. With the final holotape we see from her is after getting attacked by a mole miner. She's clearly injured and in a ton of pain at that moment, but has run out of stim packs. So perhaps what happens with Wastelanders is she actually is deceased, but maybe made a few extra holotapes along the way, a little bit more of a guide as to where we go next, or what's more likely, she probably comes back in a larger capacity, and with the introduction of human NPCs, maybe we even get to meet her. And if I was betting, we'll probably have some quests involving the inoculation progress that we made in the main story, and work together with the Overseer to try and bring back the region after seeing all of that devastation. Another pretty important faction to know about is the Raiders. The Raiders in Fallout 76's Wastelanders DLC are actually Raiders making a return. In the base game of Fallout 76, you could do several Raider quests for Rose. And although she's the last one remaining, in reality, previous to this, there were actually 5 separate Raider families. The backstory of the Raiders in 76 was it was actually several pretty well-off families that were staying at the ski resort, but then the bombs dropped and they were stuck here. So initially, these Raiders weren't actually the bad guys. They went over to the responders, asked for help, but the responders, being overwhelmed by everyone needing help, had to turn them away. And it wasn't until a year after the bombs dropped that the Raiders, now stuck in the mountains under heavy snowfall and radiation, really turned to the evil side. They ran out of food and gradually began to do what was necessary. And in the years that followed, the Raiders actually became one of the largest groups and organized factions all throughout Appalachia. And as they grew and competed with some of the other surrounding factions, they stole from the Brotherhood of Steel and launched mini nukes on the responders, eventually leading to a full-on war with the Order of Mysteries, although it doesn't seem like Wastelanders is going to explore that too much. In the end, of course, the fate of the Raiders was the fate of everyone else. They died to the Scorched and the Scorched Plague, although we know the main objective of the Raiders in Wastelanders is to return to the region because they feel like these settlers are kind of taking what was originally theirs. And this is the context to that. The Raiders were here, a powerful force, and were really only pushed out by all of the other forces in the area and making it basically uninhabitable. As far as the other major factions of Appalachia, it doesn't seem like they're getting much attention or love. I'm sure we'll see little nods or maybe even just Easter eggs here or there, perhaps in instances of expanding the lore overall, actually expanding the lore of what happened previously. But as far as the main story goes, it really seems like that is what you need to know. That is the crux of the important parts. There's been a lot of speculation that the Secret Service is a branch off of the Enclave, but it doesn't really seem like that's the case from a lore perspective. Most of the Enclave was wiped out at the White Springs Bunker by Modus. And although both must have some kind of government affiliation, the Secret Service, which seemingly will be some kind of faction or something with Wastelanders, is separate. But outside of that, there are several things with Fallout 76 that you can do right now just to prepare. Wastelanders is not only a DLC, but a DLC update. And this has led to a lot of speculation among fans as to what exactly is changing. One of the big things we actually know about is they're going to be reintegrating and adding on to the base story of Fallout 76. The story I just told you about. Now, as far as the story itself, it looks like it'll large in part be the same, but several notable characters that you encounter throughout the story, which actually there's only like 2, that being Modus and Rose, will now have things like dialogue choices, when previously they didn't. There will also be just NPCs throughout who give you a bit more context, put you on to some of the main story missions. So if you're somebody who still has never played Fallout 76's main story, maybe just waiting 6 more days could be appropriate now if you don't really want to play it anyway. It'll likely be a bit better of an experience because now there'll be a couple of humans mixed throughout, or at least some dialogue choices when appropriate. Although speaking of, if you are somebody waiting to get ready for Wastelanders, something that might be a good idea is actually leveling up a character. We just recently learned from the preview build from Wastelanders that there is going to be a hard limit of a level 20 requirement at one point to continue the story. So you'll do some of the intro questing and then need to hit level 20. So maybe if you just want to get a character to level 15 so you don't have to have that intermittent gap where you'll have to do something else, could just make the initial experience more fun, even if you do want to go on with a relatively new character, not a high-tiered existing one. Although another point of a lot of speculation was a balance change, which is not coming with Wastelanders. If you're worried about the meta changing or you having to use totally different builds, no, that's not going to be a thing at least yet. That'll likely come in the ensuing months. Bethesda has described that following Wastelanders, they hope to have more frequent or regular updates, and there are other discussions about different balance changes coming with that, but at least for now, in the next week, there shouldn't be a significant change to the meta. Although, of course, the important thing to note is, with Wastelanders, a variety of new weapons are coming, and there's some stuff you could plan with that. A lot of people have been saving up legendary script to spend at the Purveyor, which is highly advisable. The Purveyor allows you to unlock a random legendary weapon or armor, but even further allows you to buy legendary modules, which were used in crafting some of the past DLC armors. So storing some script is probably a good idea for one, to unlock some of those new weapons, although be warned, when it comes to those new weapons, in the past DLCs, to actually get the weapon from the purveyor, oftentimes you would actually have to learn the plan first. So it's not like you could just randomly get it if you don't actually know how to craft it yourself. So don't be one of those people that goes and spends all of your legendary script if you don't actually know the plans. I don't know for a fact if that's a thing with Wastelanders, it just seems likely. But even further, with those legendary modules, the past DLC to add in new content made them a vital component, so it doesn't seem all that crazy that it wouldn't be a vital component with Wastelanders and some of the new armors or items you could unlock with that. But speaking of some of these new weapons, we know Gauss weapons are getting a ton of love in this. We know of at least 3 that are coming with the DLC, so stocking up on ammo for that weapon type could be a good idea, especially considering you probably don't have much because you probably don't use the existing Gauss rifle in Adventure. There are a lot of better choices out there. But also, and this is a big one, many of you will probably want to make room in your camp, especially if you're using an existing character. We know the allies are the new companions with Wastelanders, and to get their full functionality, you set them up with an object at your camp. It's not confirmed necessarily this will require camp budget, but I would say it is immensely likely this will require camp budget. So if you are at full camp budget, it might be a good idea to plan around what exactly you can delete or just delete some stuff now. And then finally, one last thing, if you weren't aware, Bethesda has confirmed that there really aren't going to be any changes to the PvP modes with Wastelanders. This technically isn't a complete confirmation that there'll be no surprise update to Nuclear Winter or a PvP overhaul or new game mode, but it seems very, very likely that those modes won't be getting much attention or any attention. I still think there's probably a multiplayer mode coming this year, something else outside of what we have right now, maybe like a TDM or some other kind of twist that isn't Nuclear Winter, but for at least right now, I wouldn't get your hopes up for any major changes coming to that. But otherwise, yeah, that's a good idea of what you should know, or at least what I think you should know in preparation for Wastelanders. Again, if you want to know just about everything about this DLC, Friday I should have a big video on that, assuming I actually get it done on time, and tomorrow we're getting a new trailer. Bethesda already confirmed this, and I will have a full video on it. With that being said though, as always again, I thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.